The gun was cold against her ribs, but it wasn't the weapon that made her breath stop. It was the way he looked at her when he pulled the trigger on someone else. Mira hadn't screamed. That was the first thing Dante Caruso noticed about the woman who'd walked into the wrong room at the wrong time. She'd frozen in the doorway of the penthouse suite, her fingers still wrapped around the handle of her cleaning cart, her dark eyes locked on the body slumped against the marble floor. Blood pooled beneath the man's chest, spreading slowly toward the white Persian rug. And she just stood there, silent, absorbing the horror like she'd been expecting it her whole life. "Close the door," Dante said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. That was worse than shouting. Mira's hand trembled as she pulled the door shut behind her, sealing herself inside with a killer. Her mind screamed at her to run, to cry for help, to do anything but obey. But her body moved on autopilot, guided by some primal instinct that understood predators better than her conscious thoughts did. She'd grown up in South Chicago. She knew when to fight and when to survive. Dante lowered the gun, sliding it into the holster beneath his suit jacket with practiced ease. He was younger than she'd expected, mid-30s maybe, with sharp Italian features and eyes the color of cold steel. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his three-piece suit immaculate despite the violence that had just unfolded. He looked like he belonged in a boardroom, not standing over a corpse. "You're the new girl," he said, stepping over the body without looking down. "Fourth floor, right?" Mira nodded, her throat too tight to speak. "What's your name?" "Mira." The word came out as a whisper. "Mira." He repeated it slowly, testing the sound. "You weren't supposed to be here until morning." "I switched shifts," she managed. "My daughter. She has a field trip tomorrow. I needed the evening off." She didn't know why she was explaining. Didn't know why she thought her mundane life would matter to a man who'd just ended someone else's. But Dante's expression shifted slightly, something almost human flickering behind the ice. "How old?" "What?" "Your daughter." "7. He nodded, then pulled out his phone and made a call. "Marco, penthouse, clean crew." He hung up without waiting for a response, then turned back to Mira. "You're going to wait here with me until they arrive. You're going to help them. And then you're going to forget you were ever in this room." "I don't understand." "Yes, you do." He moved closer, and Mira's back hit the door. He didn't touch her, but his presence was suffocating. "You understand perfectly. The question is whether you're smart enough to do what needs to be done." Mira's mind raced. She could lie, promise anything, and then run straight to the police the moment she was free. But something in Dante's eyes told her he'd already considered that possibility, that he was 3 steps ahead of every move she might make. "I have a daughter," she said again, stronger this time. "I know. That's why you're going to do exactly what I tell you." It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. The clean crew arrived within 20 minutes. 3 men who moved with military precision, wrapping the body in plastic, scrubbing blood from marble, erasing evidence like they'd done it 1,000 times before. Dante watched from the window, his silhouette dark against the Chicago skyline, while Mira helped under Marco's terse instructions. Her hands shook as she wiped down surfaces, but she didn't cry. Didn't break. When it was done, Marco handed her an envelope thick with cash. "Bonus," Dante said from across the room. "For your discretion." Mira stared at the money. $5,000. Maybe more. Enough to cover rent for months. Enough to pretend she'd never seen what she'd seen. "I can't." "You can." Dante finally turned to face her. "And you will. Because if you don't take it, I'll know you're planning to talk. And I can't let that happen. The unspoken threat hung between them. Mira took the envelope. Good girl, he said softly. Go home to your daughter. She left without looking back, her legs barely carrying her to the elevator. But as the doors closed, she caught one last glimpse of Dante Caruso standing in the hallway, watching her with an intensity that made her skin burn. He'd let her live. She didn't know if that made him merciful or simply patient. 3 days passed before Mira saw him again. She'd spent those days in a fog of fear and guilt, jumping at every sound, checking over her shoulder, expecting men in suits to appear at her door. But nothing happened. Life continued its relentless march forward. Wake up, get Sophia ready for school, go to work, come home, repeat. The money sat hidden beneath her mattress, untouched. She told herself she'd return it somehow, that taking it made her complicit in something unforgivable. But she didn't return it. And when Dante Caruso walked into the hotel lobby on Thursday afternoon, dressed in charcoal gray and radiating the kind of power that made people move out of his way without realizing it, Mira's heart stopped. He saw her immediately, walked straight to the front desk where she was covering for a sick coworker. I need a room, he said. We're fully booked. Mira replied automatically, her voice steadier than she felt. Check again. She did, knowing what she'd find. The penthouse suite, the same one where she'd watched a man die, was listed as available. Always available. Reserved for people like Dante Caruso who didn't follow the same rules as everyone else. Penthouse is open, she said quietly. Perfect. He slid a black credit card across the counter. Put it under my name. As she processed the reservation, he leaned in slightly. You look tired. I haven't been sleeping well. Guilty conscience? Her fingers froze on the keyboard. She forced herself to meet his eyes. Wouldn't you be? A smile ghosted across his lips. Brief, unexpected, almost genuine. No, but I'm not like you. What am I like? Good. He said it like it was a diagnosis. You're a good person, Mira. That's going to make this harder for you. Make what harder? Everything that comes next. He took his key card and left her standing there, pulse racing, questions multiplying like cancer in her mind. She should have quit. Should have taken Sophia and disappeared into another city, another life. But Mira had learned long ago that running required resources she didn't have. And maybe, in some dark corner of her mind, she refused to examine too closely. She wanted to understand. Wanted to know what kind of man could kill with such cold efficiency, and then ask about her daughter with something that almost resembled concern. Dante became a fixture at the hotel over the following weeks. He never stayed long, a night here, a few hours there, but he always requested her floor, always found excuses to cross her path. At first, Mira thought he was watching her, ensuring her silence through fear and proximity. But his attention didn't feel like surveillance. It felt like interest. You're educated, he said one evening, finding her in the employee break room with a textbook open. She was taking online classes, chipping away at a degree she'd started a decade ago and never finished. Some college, she said, closing the book. Does that surprise you? Nothing about you surprises me anymore. I had you investigated the night we met. The casual admission should have terrified her. Instead, it made her angry. So you know everything then. Single mother, working 2 jobs, trying to build something better. How boring for you. Not boring. He sat down across from her, uninvited. Rare. What is? Integrity. You could have gone to the police, taken the money and run. made demands, but you did none of those things. You just kept living your life. What else was I supposed to do? Exactly what you're doing. He studied her with those cold, analytical eyes. You're surviving. I respect that. I don't want your respect. I want to forget I ever saw you. Liar. The word hit her like a slap, because he was right. She'd spent weeks trying to erase that night from her memory, but she couldn't stop thinking about him, about the way he'd moved through violence with such control, about the paradox of a man who could kill without hesitation, but seemed genuinely curious about her textbook. Who was he? Mira asked before she could stop herself. The man you killed. Dante didn't flinch. Someone who betrayed people he should have protected. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. He stood, straightening his cuffs. But since you asked a question, I'll allow you one piece of advice. Don't dig into things that will only hurt you. Some knowledge is a burden you don't want to carry. I'm already carrying it. Not yet. But you will be, if you're not careful. He left her alone with that cryptic warning, and Mira hated how much she wanted to follow him. The shift in their dynamic happened gradually, then all at once. Dante started appearing when she least expected, waiting in the parking garage after her shift, sitting in the hotel restaurant when she took her lunch break, materializing beside her when she was restocking supplies on the 4th floor. He never touched her, never made overt advances, but his presence was a constant pressure, reshaping her reality around him. And Mira, despite every logical instinct screaming at her to run, found herself drawn deeper into his orbit. "Why me?" she asked one night when he'd walked her to her car for the 3rd time that week. "There are 100 women in this city who'd fall at your feet. Why are you wasting time on someone who wants nothing to do with you?" "Because you're the only one who's ever looked at me and seen exactly what I am," Dante said. "And you're still here. I don't have a choice." "You've always had a choice, Mira. You just keep choosing to stay." She wanted to argue, to deny it, but the truth lodged in her throat like a stone. He was right. She could have quit, could have moved, could have done a dozen things to remove herself from his world. But every day she came back. Every night she waited to see if he'd appear. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. Dante stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that made her dizzy. "I want you to stop pretending you don't feel this." "Feel what?" "The pull." His voice dropped lower, intimate in the empty garage. "The way your breath changes when I walk into a room, the way you watch me when you think I'm not looking, the way you lie awake at night wondering what it would be like if you just let go." Heat flooded Mira's face. "You're delusional." "Am I?" He raised one hand, not touching her, but hovering just beside her cheek. "Tell me to leave then. Tell me you never want to see me again, and I'll disappear from your life completely. You'll never have to think about me or that night or any of this." It should have been easy. 4 simple words. "Leave me alone, Dante." But they wouldn't come, because some sick, twisted part of her didn't want him to go. "I hate you," she said instead. "I know." He smiled, dark and knowing. "But that's not the same thing, is it?" He left her standing there, trembling with emotions she couldn't name and didn't want to examine. The breaking point came on a Friday night in late autumn. Mira was closing up the conference room on the executive floor when she heard voices, angry, escalating, dangerous. Every instinct told her to walk away, to pretend she'd heard nothing, but something made her pause. One of the voices was Dante's. She moved closer to the partially open door, her heart hammering. Insulting my intelligence, Luca. I know what you did. You're paranoid, Dante. I've been loyal to this family for 20 years. Which is the only reason you're still breathing. Dante's voice was ice. But loyalty has limits. You've been skimming. Small amounts. Careful. But I notice everything. And did you really think I wouldn't find out? It was just... I needed. I don't care what you needed. You stole from me, from us. And now you need to answer for it. Mira's blood turned cold. She should run. Should hide. Should do anything but stand there listening to a conversation that would probably end the same way the last one had. But then she heard something that changed everything. Your father would have understood, Luca said desperately. Giovanni knew that sometimes. The sound of a fist hitting flesh cut him off. Mira flinched. Don't you dare speak his name. Dante's voice was raw now, stripped of its usual control. My father built this empire on respect and order. You dishonored both. And if you think invoking his memory will save you, you're even more pathetic than I thought. Please, Dante. I have a family. So did the people whose money you stole. So does everyone who depends on this organization to protect them. What makes your family more important than theirs? Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Then, Marco. Take him to the warehouse. We'll handle this properly. Footsteps. Movement. Mira pressed herself against the wall, praying they wouldn't come her direction. But as Marco led Luca past the conference room, Dante's voice stopped them. Wait. More footsteps. Coming closer. The door swung fully open and Dante stood there, staring directly at Mira with an expression she couldn't read. How long have you been standing there? I was closing up. How? Long. Long enough, she admitted, because lying would only make it worse. Dante turned to Marco. Give us a minute. Marco hesitated, then nodded, dragging a bleeding Luca toward the service elevator. When they were alone, Dante stepped out into the hallway, closing the conference room door behind him. You have a gift for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, he said quietly. I didn't mean to. I know. He ran a hand through his hair, the first sign of genuine frustration she'd ever seen from him. But that doesn't change what you heard. Are you going to kill him? Would it matter if I said no? Yes. Dante studied her for a long moment. Then no, I'm not going to kill him, but he'll wish I had. It wasn't the reassurance Mira wanted, but it was something. She nodded, turning to leave, but Dante caught her wrist, the first time he'd ever touched her. His grip was firm but not painful, and the contact sent electricity racing up her arm. This is who I am, Mira, and this is what I do. If you can't accept that, then you need to walk away now, because it only gets darker from here. She should have pulled free, should have told him she wanted nothing to do with his world of violence and blood money. But looking into his eyes, she saw something she recognized, the same exhausted determination she saw in her own mirror every morning. The weight of choices made and roads taken, of responsibilities that couldn't be abandoned no matter how heavy they became. I know who you are, she said. I've known since that first night. And you're still here. I'm still here. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or relief. His thumb brushed against her pulse point, and Mira knew he could feel how fast her heart was racing. You should be terrified of me, he said. I am. Then why? Because I'm more terrified of how much I want to understand you, of how much I... She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Dante stepped closer, closing the distance between them until she could feel the heat of his body. Say it, I can't. Say it, Mira. I want you. The confession tore out of her like a wound. God help me, I want you and I hate myself for it. For one suspended moment, neither of them moved. Then Dante's free hand came up to cup her face, his touch surprisingly gentle, and he kissed her. It wasn't soft or tentative. It was claiming, consuming, months of tension igniting all at once. Mira's hands fisted in his jacket, pulling him closer even as her mind screamed warnings. This was wrong, dangerous, a betrayal of everything she'd tried to build. But his mouth on hers felt like inevitability, like gravity, like something that had been coming since the moment she'd walked into that blood-stained penthouse. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "Come home with me," Dante said. "Tonight." Every rational part of Mira's brain said no, but the part that had been lonely and afraid and desperate for something real, that part said yes. "I can't. Sophia is with your mother this weekend. I know your schedule, remember?" The reminder that he'd been paying such close attention should have been creepy. Instead, it made something warm unfurl in her chest. "One night," she said. "That's all." Dante smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. "We'll see." His penthouse was nothing like she'd expected. Mira had imagined dark leather and steel, a space as cold and controlled as the man himself. Instead, she found floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, warm wood floors, and art that suggested actual taste rather than expensive interior decorators. There were books on the shelves: philosophy, history, Italian poetry. A chess set in mid-game sat on the coffee table. "You're staring," Dante said, shrugging out of his jacket. "It's not what I thought." "What did you think?" "Something more, I don't know, threatening?" "I save the threatening spaces for work." He moved to the bar, pouring 2 glasses of wine without asking if she wanted one. "This is where I live. There's a difference." Mira accepted the glass, her hand still shaking slightly. Now that they were here, alone, the reality of what she'd agreed to was hitting her. She'd never been the type for casual encounters, had never been able to separate physical desire from emotional connection. And with Dante, everything was already impossibly complicated. "You're overthinking," he said, reading her too easily. "You're a mob boss who's investigating his own people. I watched you beat a man bloody an hour ago. I think I'm thinking exactly the right amount." "Fair point." He set down his glass and crossed to where she stood. "But you came anyway." "I'm starting to question my judgment." "Good. You should." His fingers traced the line of her jaw. "Because this isn't going to be simple, Mira. I can't promise you safety or normalcy or any of the things you deserve. All I can promise is honesty. In this space, with you, I won't pretend to be anything other than what I am." "And what are you?" "Dangerous, possessive, probably going to ruin you in ways you can't imagine yet." His thumb brushed her lower lip. "But I'll never lie to you, and I'll protect you and your daughter with everything I have." The casual inclusion of Sophia in his protection made Mira's throat tight. "Why?" "Because you're mine now, and I take care of what's mine." It should have sounded possessive and controlling, and maybe it was. But Mira had spent so many years being alone, being the only person responsible for her own survival, that the idea of someone claiming her, truly claiming her, with all the weight and obligation that implied, was intoxicating. "I'm not a possession," she said, but the protest was weak. "No, you're something far more valuable." Dante's other hand settled on her waist, pulling her against him. You're a choice I'm making every day, and I need to know if you're choosing me back. Mira thought about Sophia, about her degree, about the careful life she'd built from nothing. Thought about all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Then she thought about the loneliness that had haunted her for years, the constant fear and struggle, the exhaustion of always being strong. With Dante, she didn't have to be strong. She could be afraid and angry and honest, and he took it all without flinching. I'm choosing you, she whispered, at least for tonight. Tonight is enough, he said, and kissed her again. This time, when his hands moved to the buttons of her shirt, she didn't stop him. Mira woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the warm weight of Dante's arm across her waist. For a moment she lay still, absorbing the strangeness of it all. And the silk sheets against her skin, the expensive mattress that cradled her body, the man beside her, breathing slowly and evenly in sleep, his features softer without their usual harsh control. She should feel guilty, should be spiraling about the choices she'd made, the lines she'd crossed. But lying there in the quiet morning light, all she felt was peace. Dangerous, intoxicating peace. Dante stirred, his eyes opening to find her watching him. Morning. Hi. Any regrets? Mira considered the question honestly. Not yet. Ask me again later. He smiled, pulling her closer. I'll make you breakfast. You cook? I'm Italian. It's genetic. She laughed, and the sound felt foreign. When was the last time she'd laughed like that? Unguarded and genuine. Dante's expression softened, and he pressed a kiss to her forehead before sliding out of bed. Watching him move around the kitchen later, barefoot in jeans and a t-shirt that made him look younger and somehow more dangerous, Mira felt the ground shift beneath her. This wasn't just attraction anymore. This was something deeper, more terrifying. This was the beginning of falling. What are you thinking? Dante asked, sliding a plate of eggs and toast in front of her. That I'm in trouble. Because of last night? Because of everything. Because I don't know how to want someone like you without losing myself. Dante sat down across from her, his expression serious. I don't want you to lose yourself. I want you exactly as you are. Sharp and stubborn and too good for me. But I won't pretend this is going to be easy. My world is dangerous, Mira. People will find out about you eventually, and when they do, you'll become a target. Are you trying to scare me away? I'm trying to be honest. You deserve to know what you're walking into. Mira pushed her food around her plate, thinking, what happened to your father? The question landed hard. Dante's jaw tightened. He was killed 3 years ago. Ambushed leaving a restaurant in Little Italy. I'm sorry. Don't be. He knew the risks. We all do. Dante's gaze was distant now, lost in memories. But he was supposed to have protection. Someone on his security team sold him out. I've spent the last 3 years cleaning house, making sure it never happens again. That's why I can't tolerate betrayal. That's why Luca... He stopped, shaking his head. This life is built on trust. Break that, and everything collapses. Is that what you are? A mob boss rebuilding your father's empire? I prefer businessman with complicated family obligations. But yes, essentially. He met her eyes. Does it matter? It should. But does it? Mira thought about her daughter, about the kind of man she wanted Sophia to see her mother with, about the example she was setting. Then she thought about the way Dante had held her last night, like she was precious and breakable and worth protecting. I don't know yet, she admitted. That's fair. He reached across the table, taking her hand. "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." The next 3 months were the strangest of Mira's life. By day, she was still the hotel employee, still Sophia's mother, still the woman grinding toward a better future. But by night, she belonged to Dante Caruso. He never asked her to change, never demanded she fit into his world or give up her own. Instead, he carved out space for her in his life, making room for her daughter's bedtime stories and her college classes and her need for normalcy. But the danger never disappeared. It lurked in the background like a wolf waiting for weakness. Mira learned to recognize Dante's men, the way they moved, the way they watched. Learned which restaurants were safe and which neighborhoods to avoid. Learned that Dante's phone calls at odd hours meant someone had stepped out of line, and she wouldn't see him for days while he handled it. She learned to live with the fear. And somewhere in the middle of it all, she fell completely in love with him. It happened in small moments, Dante reading to Sophia when Mira was too exhausted to keep her eyes open. Dante appearing at her college with coffee during finals week. Dante's hand finding hers in the dark, holding on like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to something good. "I love you," she told him one night, the words escaping before she could stop them. They were in his car, parked outside her apartment, and Dante went very still. "You shouldn't," he said finally. "I know, but I do." He turned to face her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Mira, you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know." Dante's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "I've never loved anyone. I'm not sure I'm capable of it. But if I were, it would be you." It wasn't the declaration she'd hoped for, but it was honest. And with Dante, honesty was worth more than pretty lies. "That's enough," she said. But 3 weeks later, her world shattered. The call came at 2 in the morning. Mira jerked awake, her phone buzzing on the nightstand. Unknown number. Her heart hammered as she answered. "Mira Romano?" A man's voice, professional and cold. "Yes?" "This is Detective Martinez with Chicago PD. We need you to come down to the station." Ice flooded her veins. "Why? What happened?" "It's regarding Dante Caruso. We have some questions about your relationship with him." The floor dropped out from under her. I don't know what you're talking about." "Ms. Romano, we have surveillance footage of you entering and leaving his residence on multiple occasions. We have phone records. We know about your involvement. Now you can come in voluntarily and cooperate, or we can make this much more difficult. Your choice." Mira's mind raced. If the police knew about her, if they had evidence, then Sophia could be in danger. CPS could get involved. She could lose everything. "I'll come in," she said. "Just, please don't involve my daughter." "That depends on how cooperative you are." The line went dead. Mira sat in the dark, shaking. She needed to call Dante, needed to warn him. But what if her phone was tapped? What if calling him made everything worse? Before she could decide, there was a knock at her door. She looked through the peephole and nearly collapsed with relief. Marco stood in the hallway, his expression grim. "Mr. Caruso sent me," he said when she opened the door. "You need to come with me. Now." "The police?" "We know. That's why we're getting you out." "I can't just disappear. I have Sophia. Already taken care of. Your mother has her. She thinks you got called in for an emergency shift. You have about 4 hours before the police realize you're not coming in voluntarily." Mira's head spun. "Where's Dante?" "Waiting for you. We need to move." She grabbed her phone and wallet, following Marco to a black SUV idling at the curb. The drive took 20 minutes, winding through back streets until they reached a warehouse on the south side. Marco led her inside, through a maze of corridors to a door guarded by two armed men. Inside, Dante stood at a table covered in documents, his expression harder than she'd ever seen it. "Leave us," he said to Marco, who nodded and disappeared. When they were alone, Mira's composure finally cracked. "What the hell is happening?" "Someone talked. Someone told the police about us. About you." "Who?" "I'm still figuring that out." His voice was ice. "But whoever it is wanted to hurt me by exposing you, and they succeeded. The detective said they have surveillance, phone records, all circumstantial. Not enough to charge me with anything, but enough to make your life hell. Enough to put Sophia at risk." The mention of her daughter made Mira's chest tight. "What do I do?" Dante crossed to her, gripping her shoulders. "You have two choices. One, you go to the police, tell them we had a brief relationship that's over, cooperate fully. They'll probably believe you're just a civilian who got in over her head. You'll be safe. Sophia will be safe. But we'll never see each other again. And the second choice? You come with me. Right now. I have people who can create new identities, relocate you somewhere safe until this blows over. But Mira, if you choose that, there's no going back. You'll be fully in my world. Sophia will grow up knowing what I am, and you'll have to live with that." Mira's mind reeled. This was it. The moment she'd known was coming from the first night she'd seen him kill. The moment when the consequences became real. "How did they find out?" she asked. Dante's jaw clenched. "Luca, the man from the hotel. He gave them enough to start looking, and they found you." "I thought you said you weren't going to kill him." "I didn't. I showed mercy, and this is what it cost me." The bitterness in his voice cut through her panic. Dante had broken his own rules for her, had chosen something other than violence, and it had backfired. "I'm sorry," Mira whispered. "Don't be. I made my choice." He pulled her close, his forehead against hers. "Now you need to make yours. And Mira, whatever you choose, I'll understand. I'll make sure you and Sophia are protected either way." Mira closed her eyes, thinking of her daughter's laugh, her dreams for the future, the normal life she'd fought so hard to build. Then she thought of Dante, brutal and dangerous and impossibly gentle with her. The man who'd seen everything she was and wanted her anyway. "I can't leave," she said. "I tried. God knows I tried to walk away, but I can't. Not anymore." Dante exhaled and she felt the tension leave his body. "You're sure?" "No, but I'm choosing you anyway." He kissed her then, desperate and claiming, and Mira kissed him back, sealing whatever fate awaited them both. The aftermath was chaos. Dante's people moved fast. New identities, new city, new life constructed in 72 hours. Mira became Emily Rossi, a graphic designer relocating for work. Sophia became Sophie, enrolled in a private school under Dante's protection. They moved to a brownstone in Brooklyn that felt both safe and strange. And through it all, Dante was there. He had expected her to fall apart, to rage at him for the life he had stolen from her. But Mira had spent too many years surviving to crumble now. Instead, she adapted, learned, became someone new while holding tight to who she'd always been. "You're remarkable," Dante said one evening, watching her help Sophia with homework in their new kitchen. "I'm terrified," Mira corrected. "I'm just good at hiding it." "I know." He moved behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "But you're still here, still fighting. That's what makes you remarkable. Sophia looked up from her math problems, her young face serious. Dante, are you my mom's boyfriend? The question hung in the air. Mira tensed, waiting for Dante to deflect or lie. But he crouched down to Sophia's level, meeting her eyes with the same respect he'd show an adult. I'm someone who cares very much about your mother, and about you. Is that okay? Sophia considered this. Do you make her happy? I try to. Then it's okay. She went back to her homework, dismissing the adults. Later, when Sophia was asleep, Mira found Dante on the roof, staring at the Brooklyn skyline. You told her the truth, she said. She deserved it. Most people would have lied. I'm not most people. He pulled her against him, and they stood together in the cold night air. I meant what I said earlier, about caring for you both. I know. And Mira? I need you to understand something. The detective, the investigation, it's not over. I'm handling it, but there will be fallout. There are always consequences. I know that too. And you're still here. I'm still here. Dante turned her to face him, his eyes intense in the darkness. I don't deserve you. But I'm selfish enough to keep you anyway. Good, Mira said, because I'm not going anywhere. 3 months later, the detective who'd been investigating Dante was arrested for corruption. The case fell apart. The threats dissolved like smoke. Mira never asked how Dante had made it happen. She didn't want to know. What she did know was that she'd chosen a life that would never be simple, never be safe, never be what she'd once dreamed of. But lying in bed with Dante's arms around her, listening to Sophia's soft breathing from the next room, she found something she'd never expected. She found home. Not in a place, but in a person. In the dangerous, complicated, impossibly devoted man who'd claimed her heart and promised to protect it with everything he had. I love you, Dante whispered in the dark, the first time he'd said the words. Mira's breath caught. You said you weren't capable of love. I lied. Or maybe I just hadn't met you yet. She turned in his arms, finding his mouth in the darkness. I love you too, even though I shouldn't, even though it's insane. Especially because it's insane, he corrected, and she felt him smile against her lips. Outside, the city hummed with danger and possibility. Inside, wrapped in silk and shadows and the arms of a man who'd rewritten her entire world, Mira Romano, now Emily Rossi, finally understood what it meant to truly choose. Not safety, not certainty, but the terrifying, exhilarating freedom of loving someone worth the risk. And in the end, that was enough.